BeautyLand by Marie-Helene Bertino. AI recommended this book to me, which should have been my first red flag over here, but no, missed it. I asked, I think it was Gemini, what book can I read from the past 5 years that's got like literary elements but also a speculative element, because I'm missing my speculative elements as I'm reading more literature. But yeah, it said BeautyLand as a great book, and I didn't watch any reviews at the time, but if I had, there's a lot of people that really like BeautyLand, so I probably would have picked it. But as it happens, for this particular pick, I am not like other girls. This book was not my favorite. It wasn't, BeautyLand's not terrible. Like, I feel like the author did a pretty good job, a really good job up until adulthood for the main character, and then I feel like she got to the edge, and then just like stepped away. She didn't go as far as I would have liked the story to have gone. So in case you haven't read BeautyLand, which is I think why you watch this, to see if you want to read it too, let's go through a synopsis, a brief synopsis, just spoiler free, so that you know what I'm talking about.
Adina is born at the same time that Voyager 1 in the 70s takes a message in a bottle from Earth to whatever alien species happens to find it as it travels ever further from us. Adina is not just a human baby, though. She is also an alien probe sent to document and report back about Earth and humanity. She does this via a fax machine. Adina grows up poor in Philadelphia. She gets a scholarship to go to high school, and the biggest life decision she makes is to move to New York as a young adult. An ordinary life happens, and Adina makes quirky observations about it to send back to her alien home. End of plot. This is a slice of life tale, not an action movie or adventure story. Our protagonist doesn't lead us into an alternate reality in which aliens and humans begin a long and prosperous relationship. Maybe you consider me telling you that a spoiler, but seriously, you're going to do not finish or be miserable while you read BeautyLand if you go in expecting Adina to have an exceptional life. This story examines ostensibly normal American life with specificity. So, how approachable is this tale for an overworked, ordinary human such that Adina would make quirky observations of? The 2 a.m. test. Do not read this at 2 a.m. The entire book is written in a quirky, often enjoyable style of leaving out the basics, almost like some people do when they're texting. It's not that bad, not that person who never spells out a single word. More like when you send, "she's on her way," when you mean your mother-in-law, and you mean that neither of you have to fold that mountain of washing anymore because she's going to do it as soon as she gets there because she's just that wonderful, and you almost feel like crying with relief. The "she's on her way" level of leaving stuff out is how this book is written. And that's delightful 95% of the time. But then there's still 5% of the time when there's three women in a sentence and she picks it up. And you want to toss your e-reader across the room because you don't know that pop culture reference either. And you don't know if you're supposed to know the reference and you're just not American, so you don't. Or if you're supposed to know, then is this a mother-in-law we like or we don't like? Or if you're not supposed to know the pop culture reference because it's made up and it's supposed to absorb associations from what's around it, how do you know? Also, sometimes I just didn't know what was happening. At the very end, in the climax of the story, I don't know if Adina was in her room or on an actual ferry. I don't know what happened in the book's climax. Anyway, I'd recommend reading this book with a full night's sleep to your credit. Enough said. Emotional valence. I got hot in the face once when, at a funeral, a character says, "It's amazing to know," he says, "that you're never going to be totally okay, ever again." That's what happened to my family after my sister's death. It's a real gut punch. That said, most of the oh-so-true observations in this book elicit a snuffy little laugh, rather than powerful emotions. Adina's life is ordinary and infinitely recognizable and true. It's your comfy house cardigan that isn't going to tug your emotions far. Child neglect due to being a page-turner test. No risk. My personal opinion is this one's going to stall your reading for a month or two if you're trying to resurrect your identity as a reader. There is no grand hope in the book drawing you forward. There's no who done it. There's no how will they manage it. This is a still pond, not a page turner. Moving on to the tropes that this book includes. Speculative element. I love me some sci-fi fantasy. One of the reviews I watched after I read this book said, "You can't escape the speculative element if you don't like that sort of thing." I had to rewind and make sure I'd heard that right, especially in light of the ending. The story has a speculative element as big as yesteryears. If you've read that book, you know you know. Here's a rule I've learned as a writer. If you can remove a description, a side character, a location, etc., and the story doesn't change, you should remove that aspect of the story or smush it into something that already exists. Adina's alien nature comes so close to being removable. If I had been the author, I would have removed it. The mum could have had her diagnosed with autism instead of being activated as an alien, and then Adina could have kept her notes to herself, or gotten replies initially from a psychiatric nurse she faxed, and the story would have held up just fine. All the loneliness explained for the rest of the story. And a character in the story does mention that Adina might be autistic, so I'm not making that up. After reading Yesteryear, I chose this book to have a truly powerful speculative element, and sadly, BeautyLand did not deliver. Another trope, thriving despite trauma. I actually love the way that Adina deals with trauma, which is to say the big stuff hurts in the moment, but most of it she doesn't recognize until decades later. That recognition that often traumatic experiences are perceived as normal by a young person is so valid. However, the quiet nature of the pain she experiences does add to that lack of pivotal points in Adina's life. I don't think Marie-Helene could have fixed that, if fixed is even the right word. The quiet pain is the whole point, but Adina never really thrives, and I found that to be tragic. Maybe that's the whole point? I'm not convinced. But human lives are lowercase t traumatic, and this book does show that. And that's really all the tropes about this story that I seek out and feel like commenting on. It's very quiet pain to not have other aspects of this book to rant about. And so, on to the thing that most deserves deep analysis in BeautyLand. Meaningless. Aloneness. Years of repetition. Maybe this will mean more to those who've stayed near their childhood home. I myself have travelled all over the world. There's a line in the book that I wish I'd highlighted so I can find it again. And it says that most humans choose to stay close to what they know. You cannot prove that by me, and I wonder if it really is true in general. My own experience growing up in a small town, Adina was in a city, is that most young adults leave. They go to somewhere where they can train for more than entry-level jobs, and usually they never come back. Even professionals and homeschool mums I've met over the years tend to have moved at least interstate. The few adults who've never been out of state are circus exhibit level oddities, in my experience. So my assessment is that Adina was not living a normal Westerner's life, which is the whole point of the book. And if that's the case, I think the author had room to add more events to the book, more plot points, twists. It didn't have to be this slow. Adina could have had a career rather than staying as a receptionist for decades at the same company. I mean, who does that? No promotion, no switching company. Someone in the book, no spoilers, as I said, she wonders if Adina is autistic, and I don't think that's too far wrong. The contentment with routine is unusually high for a person. And I don't think her stability through adulthood is very everyman relatable, which I'm pretty sure is what Adina is supposed to be. She's a young adult through 9/11, and yet she doesn't have anything to say about the 2008 crash. That's not mentioned in the book. The enormous increases in the cost of housing, again, never mentioned. She seems to have the same rental apartment the entire book, the entire adulthood, and yet no mention of the increase in housing prices. There's nothing about the 2020's pandemic response, and on and on. It's like the pop culture references die off, and none of the shocks that have decimated the lives of the generation she belongs to, Zennials, hit her except for 9/11. Adina is lonely and purposeless, and that is at odds with what I know of the human experience during these decades. We're together in shared trauma, even if we only share this in passing and not up close as we stare into our screens. Did I mention that Adina isn't online for most of the book? She was around for the birth of the internet, but never uses it. Even at her boring job. I don't believe it. Mm-mm. And how did she not catch the "you can be anything you want to be, oh gifted child" vibe? Why doesn't she have any goals? Not at work and not at home. She drifts. Potentially because the author couldn't think up something better. I don't buy into Adina. She's a real person as a child, but once she hits adulthood, her isolation is unbelievable.
Unpopular opinion? Probably. That's fine by me. It is my opinion, and I am sticking to it. Is that ironic, given what I just said about Adina's personal choices? Whatever. I am Gemma, and this has been Reading Gems Reading BeautyLand for the last time in my life. Like if you liked the video, subscribe if you would like to see more like it. Happy reading.